If this story touched your heart, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. It always amazes me how stories like this connect us across miles. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because tomorrow a brand new story is coming your way. One filled with emotion, surprise, and a twist you won't see coming. Until then, thank you for being here. This journey is just getting started. Jackson Miles wasn't the kind of man who took vacations. At 39, he had built a real estate empire from the ground up, working 80-hour weeks, closing multi-million-dollar deals, and never once taking his foot off the gas. For him, slowing down felt unnatural, like stepping into someone else's life. But something about this week was different. Maybe it was the pressure building behind the scenes, or the emptiness echoing louder in the quiet hours. Whatever it was, Jackson found himself flying across the country to a luxury oceanfront resort in Malibu, California, hoping a change of scenery might silence the noise in his mind. The resort was everything the brochure promised: towering palms, warm sea breeze, and the kind of quiet that wrapped around you like a blanket. Jackson stepped into the lobby just before sunset, the golden light spilling across the marble floor. He adjusted the collar of his crisp shirt, barely noticing the soft music playing overhead or the gentle chatter of other guests. His focus was already drifting back to the business calls he'd missed during the flight, the emails piling up in his inbox. He approached the front desk, gave his name, and waited as the concierge processed his check-in. That's when it happened. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a figure walk through the glass doors. At first he didn't register it, but then he looked again, and everything inside him went still. Rachel. She hadn't changed much. Her dark, blonde hair was tied back in a loose braid, and she moved with the same quiet grace he remembered so vividly. But it wasn't just her that caught his attention. She was holding the hand of a little girl. The child looked to be about 6 years old. Her hazel eyes were wide with wonder as she stared up at the chandeliers, her small hand wrapped securely in Rachel's. And though Jackson had never seen this girl before, something about her, something in her features, struck him like a thunderclap. His chest tightened. There was a familiarity he couldn't explain. The shape of her face, the way she held her shoulders, even the tilt of her head. Jackson took a step back, his heart suddenly pounding louder than the soft jazz playing overhead. He wasn't a man who got rattled. He'd negotiated with ruthless investors, stared down city officials, even handled multi-million-dollar lawsuits without blinking. But this was something else entirely. Rachel hadn't seen him yet. She was speaking with the receptionist now, gently adjusting the little girl's sun hat as she waited. Jackson watched in silence, his mind racing with questions he didn't know how to ask. Could it be? He clenched his fist to steady himself. After all these years, could that little girl be his? Jackson couldn't sleep that night. Even in the comfort of a high-end suite with ocean views and crisp Egyptian cotton sheets, his mind refused to rest. The image of Rachel standing in the lobby, holding the hand of that little girl, haunted him like a ghost he couldn't chase away. He had thought about Rachel over the years, brief flashes, usually when he was alone, but he'd buried those memories quickly. Work was always louder than his past. But now the past had walked through the same lobby doors as he did, bringing with it a pair of hazel eyes that looked far too familiar. He needed answers, and he wasn't the type to wait. The next morning, Jackson dressed like it was a board meeting. Slate grey button-down, dark jeans, clean watch. He told himself it was for confidence, for control. But deep down, he knew it was armor. He found them easily, sitting on the terrace just off the resort cafe. Rachel had a coffee in her hands. The little girl, Ava, he'd overheard at the desk, was quietly coloring in a book, her legs swinging off the edge of her chair. Jackson stood a few feet away, watching them from behind a column. He'd faced high-stakes deals in downtown Manhattan, but this felt like walking into a battlefield with no plan. Still, he moved forward. Rachel saw him first. Her body went still the second their eyes met. She set her coffee down with a careful, deliberate motion, then looked toward Ava, her gaze protective, almost instinctive. He stopped at the edge of their table, keeping his voice low and steady. "We need to talk," he said. Rachel didn't argue. She glanced at Ava, then back at him. "Not here. Meet me by the beach path, 10 minutes. Jackson nodded once and walked away. 10 minutes later, the wind was sharp with salt as he waited under a palm tree near the edge of the property. When Rachel finally appeared, her arms were crossed, eyes guarded. "You saw her," she said, no preamble, no small talk. "I did." Rachel looked away, her jaw tight. "I didn't plan for this to happen." "Is she mine?" he asked, his voice sharper than intended. A long pause, then quietly, "Yes." It felt like the ground shifted beneath him. Jackson took a step back, running a hand through his hair, trying to process the weight of that one word. 6 years. "Rachel, 6 years and you didn't tell me." "I was going to," she said, her voice breaking, "but you were already gone, mentally, emotionally. You think I wanted to raise her alone? You think I wanted to keep her from you?" "Then, why?" "Because I was scared. Scared you'd treat her like a responsibility, not a daughter. Scared you'd try to buy her a future instead of being part of it." Jackson stared at her, breath shallow. "She deserves more than a last-minute father," Rachel said. "So if you're here now, if this actually means something to you, prove." He didn't answer right away, because he knew she was right, and because somewhere deep inside he was scared too. Jackson didn't go back to his suite after that conversation. He walked the length of the shoreline instead, letting the cool Pacific breeze hit his face, trying to settle the storm inside him. Rachel's words had landed like punches, because they weren't wrong. He hadn't been the man she or a child could rely on back then, but that didn't mean he couldn't become him now. The next morning, Jackson showed up at the cafe just after 7. Not dressed like a CEO this time, just a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. It felt strange dressing down, but this wasn't a boardroom. This was something much more important. Rachel was already seated with Ava at their usual spot on the terrace. She looked surprised to see him, though she hid it well. Ava peeked up from behind her juice box, blinking at him with quiet curiosity. "Mind if I join you?" Jackson asked, his voice calm but careful. Rachel nodded. "Your call." He pulled out a chair and sat across from Ava, who was now spreading strawberry jam onto a piece of toast with intense concentration. Jackson smiled softly. "I heard you." "Like coloring," he said. Ava didn't answer right away. She glanced up at her mother as if checking for permission. When Rachel gave a small encouraging nod, she finally replied in a voice barely louder than a whisper. "Sometimes." Jackson reached into the bag he brought with him and pulled out a small, unopened art kit. Markers, stickers, glitter pens. He placed it gently on the table. "I saw this in the hotel gift shop. Figured it might be more fun than hotel crayons." Ava's eyes widened slightly. She didn't touch it, but she didn't look away either. They sat like that for a while, quiet but not uncomfortable. Jackson asked her simple questions. Favorite animals, favorite color. He listened carefully, responding with warmth, but never pushing too hard. Every time Ava answered, even with just a nod, it felt like a win. Rachel watched the whole interaction like a hawk, but there was a shift in her body language, less tense, more thoughtful. At one point, she stood up to take a phone call, leaving Jackson and Ava alone. It was the first real test. Ava stayed quiet for a moment, then pointed to one of the glitter pens. "I like that one," she said. Jackson smiled. "The silver one?" "Yeah, it's cool, kind of sparkly like the ocean this morning." Ava looked at him, tilting her head. "Do you live by an ocean?" He shook his head. "No, I live in New York. Big buildings, lots of traffic, not as fun as seashells and beach walks." She considered this for a moment. Then, to his surprise, she pushed the silver pen toward him. "You can use it." Jackson felt something tighten in his chest. It was just a pen, but it wasn't just a pen. It was her first olive branch. "Thanks," he said softly, accepting it like it was made of gold. When Rachel returned, she noticed the pen in his hand, and for the first time, she smiled. Not forced, not guarded, just real. And Jackson knew this was only the beginning. Over the next few days, something unexpected began to happen. Ava, quiet, cautious Ava, started letting him in. Not all at once, not in big, dramatic ways, but in little moments that Jackson held onto like they were made of glass. She let him sit beside her at breakfast without inching closer to Rachel. She let him tie her shoelaces when they came undone during their walk to the resort's butterfly garden, and one afternoon, when the wind caught her hair and blew sand in her eyes, she reached for his hand, just for balance, just for a second. But to Jackson, it meant the world. Rachel saw it too. She wasn't as guarded anymore. The tension that used to live in her shoulders had softened. Sometimes she even laughed at Jackson's dry jokes, and once, just once, he caught her watching him and Ava with a look he couldn't quite name. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it wasn't anger either. It was curiosity, maybe even hope. They were walking through the resort's nature trail, a short loop just under half a mile, when Jackson finally asked the question that had been pressing against his chest since their first conversation on the beach. Why now? Rachel didn't answer at first. She kept her gaze ahead, watching Ava skip a few feet in front of them, collecting leaves like treasures. "You could have kept avoiding me," Jackson added. "Blocked me out forever. But you came here. You let this happen." Rachel stopped walking. "Jackson did too. She started asking about you," she said quietly. "About her dad." Jackson's stomach dropped. "At first I told her what I thought would be enough. That families come in all shapes, that sometimes daddies don't stay, but she didn't let it go. She wanted to know if you were out there, if you even knew she existed." The guilt hit him like a wave. "She's smart," Rachel added. "And she's strong." But she was starting to feel like she wasn't enough, like maybe you didn't want to know her. Jackson exhaled hard. "That's not true." "I know that now," she said. "But back then, back when I found out I was pregnant, you were barely sleeping, barely home. You'd become someone I didn't recognize. You were ruthless, Jack, focused, cold. I was building a future." Rachel turned to him, her eyes fierce. "You were building your future. I had to protect hers." He couldn't argue with that. And maybe, deep down, he didn't want to. They watched Ava in silence for a moment. She had found a butterfly and was following it carefully, her hands clasped behind her back. "I'm not that guy anymore," Jackson finally said. "At least I'm trying not to be." Rachel nodded slowly. "I can see that." He looked at her. "So what now?" Rachel took a breath. "Now? We keep walking, step by step, on her terms, not ours." Jackson nodded, his eyes never leaving. His daughter. For once, he wasn't leading the way, and for the first time in his life, he was okay with that. By the 5th day, something had shifted. Not just in Ava, but in Jackson, too. He no longer checked his emails first thing in the morning. His phone stayed face down at breakfast. Meetings and contracts could wait. For once, life wasn't being measured in deadlines or decimal points, but in seconds. In shared pancakes, quiet conversations, and the sound of a little girl laughing as she ran through the waves. Ava was still cautious. She didn't call him Dad. She still glanced at Rachel when she wasn't sure how to respond, but the fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by something Jackson hadn't dared hope for: trust. One morning, as he walked into the resort cafe, he saw her already seated at their table, swinging her legs under the chair. Rachel was pouring coffee. Ava looked up and smiled. Not a shy one, not a maybe. "I trust you" smile, a real one, like he belonged. "Morning," Jackson said, pulling out his chair. "Pancakes again." Ava nodded. "But they're better with blueberries, not just syrup." Jackson grinned. Noted. They ate. They laughed. At one point, Ava offered him a bite of her pancake without Rachel prompting her, and Jackson felt something crack open in his chest. After breakfast, the three of them took a walk along the private shoreline. The sun was warm, the breeze just right. Ava ran ahead, collecting seashells again, calling back to show off her latest treasure. Jackson and Rachel followed behind, side by side. "She's different with you now," Rachel said softly. "Lighter." Jackson nodded, watching his daughter twirl in the sand. "She's everything I didn't know I needed." They sat on a bench facing the ocean while Ava sorted her shells nearby, quietly mumbling to herself in that imaginative way only children can. "She's never had this before," Rachel said after a while. A father figure, someone who shows up. Jackson looked down at his hands, quiet for a moment. I can't get those years back, I know that. But I'm here now, if you'll let me be. Rachel didn't speak right away. The wind picked up slightly, carrying Ava's voice on the breeze. She was humming now, completely content in her own little world. And what happens when this trip is over? Rachel finally asked. When we check out, fly back to reality? What happens to this? Jackson turned to face her. No hesitation. This isn't a vacation for me, Rachel. This is the beginning. I want to be in her life, really be there. Not as some guy who shows up once in a while, as her father, consistently, every day. Rachel studied him for a long moment. Then she whispered two words that carried the weight of everything they'd been through. Then prove it. Before he could respond, Ava ran over, holding something tightly in her palm. Look, she said, opening her fingers to reveal a tiny white shell. It's the lucky one. Jackson knelt down, taking the shell gently. Then I guess we keep it. Ava smiled, then, without a word, climbed onto his lap, resting her head against his chest. Rachel watched them, her eyes soft, and for the first time Jackson didn't feel like a man chasing success. He felt like a father. Finally, if this story touched you the way it touched us, we'd love to hear from you. What part moved you the most? Was it Ava finally trusting Jackson, or Rachel finally letting down her guard? Maybe it reminded you of someone from your own life, a father, a child, or a second chance you wish you had. Take a moment and drop your thoughts in the comments. Whether it's just one line or a full reflection, your voice matters here. And while you're at it, let us know. Where in the world are you watching from? It's always incredible to see this community growing across cities, states, and countries, all connected through the power of storytelling. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because tomorrow, another story is coming, one that might just hit even closer to home. These aren't just stories, they're reminders of love, redemption, and the quiet power of showing up when it matters most. So, let's talk about it. Let's make this more than just a video. Let's make it a conversation. We'll be reading every comment. And as always, thank you for being here.